On the Poetical Works of George Wither by Charles Lamb. 1815, text of 1818. The poems of G. Wither are distinguished by a hearty homeliness of manner and a plain moral speaking. He seems to have passed his life in one continued act of an innocent self-pleasing. That which he calls his motto is a continued self-eulogy of 2,000 lines, yet we read it to the end without any feeling of distaste, almost without a consciousness that we have been listening all the while to a man praising himself. There are none of the cold particles in it, the hardness and self-ends which render vanity and egotism hateful. He seems to be praising another person under the mask of self, or rather we feel that it was indifferent to him where he found the virtue which he celebrates, whether another's bosom or his own were its chosen receptacle. His poems are full, and this in particular is one downright confession of a generous self-seeking. But by pg 211 self he sometimes means a great deal, his friends, his principles, his country, the human race. Whoever expects to find in the satirical pieces of this writer any of those peculiarities which pleased him in the satires of Dryden or Pope will be grievously disappointed. Here are no high-finished characters, no nice traits of individual nature, few or no personalities. The game run down is coarse general vice, or folly as it appears in classes. A liar, a drunkard, a coxcomb is stripped and whipped. No Shaftesbury, no Villiers or Wharton is curiously anatomized and read upon. But to a well-natured mind there is a charm of moral sensibility running through them which amply compensates the want of those luxuries. Wither seems everywhere bursting with a love of goodness and a hatred of all low and base actions. At this day it is hard to discover what parts in the poem here particularly alluded to, abuses stripped and whipped, could have occasioned the imprisonment of the author. Was vice in high places more suspicious than now? Had she more power, or more leisure to listen after ill reports? That a man should be convicted of a libel when he named no names but hate, and envy, and lust, and avarice, is like one of the indictments in the Pilgrim's Progress, where Faithful is arraigned for having railed on our noble Prince Beelzebub, and spoken contemptibly of his honorable friends, the Lord Old Man, the Lord Carnal Delight, and the Lord Luxurious. What unlucky jealousy could have tempted the great men of those days to appropriate such innocent abstractions to themselves? Wither seems to have contemplated to a degree of idolatry his own possible virtue. He is forever anticipating persecution and martyrdom, fingering, as it were, the flames, to try how he can bear them. Perhaps his premature defiance sometimes made him obnoxious to censures, which he would otherwise have slipped by. The homely versification of these satires is not likely to attract in the present day. It is certainly not such as we should expect from a poet soaring in the high region of his fancies with his garland and his singing robes about him. 34 nor is it such as he has shown in his Philarete and in some parts in his shepherd's hunting. He seems to have adopted this dress with voluntary humility, as fittest for a moral teacher, pg 212, as our divines choose sober gray or black, but in their humility consists their sweetness. The deepest tone of moral feeling in them, though all throughout is weighty, earnest, and passionate, is in those pathetic injunctions against shedding of blood in quarrels, in the chapter entitled Revenge. The story of his own forbearance, which follows, is highly interesting. While the Christian sings his own victory over anger, the man of courage cannot help peeping out to let you know that it was some higher principle than fear which counseled his forbearance. Whether encaged or roaming at liberty, Wither never seems to have abated a jot of that free spirit which sets its mark upon his writings, as much as a predominant feature of independence impresses every page of our late glorious Burns. But the elder poet wraps his proof armor closer about him, the other wears his too much outwards. He is thinking too much of annoying the foe to be quite easy within. The spiritual defenses of Wither, perpetual source of inward sunshine, the magnanimity of the modern is not without its alloy of soreness and a sense of injustice which seems perpetually to gall and irritate. Wither was better skilled in the sweet uses of adversity. He knew how to extract the precious jewel from the head of the toad without drawing any of the ugly venom along with it. The prison notes of Wither are finer than the wood notes of most of his poetical brethren. The description in the 4th eglogue of his shepherd's hunting, which was composed during his imprisonment in the Marshalsea, of the power of the muse to extract pleasure from common objects, has been oftener quoted and is more known than any part of his writings. Indeed, the whole eglogue is in a strain so much above not only what himself, but almost what any other poet has written, that he himself could not help noticing it. He remarks that his spirits had been raised higher than they were wont through the love of poesy. The praises of poetry have been often sung in ancient and in modern times. Strange powers have been ascribed to it of influence over animate and inanimate auditors. Its force over fascinated crowds has been acknowledged. But before WITHER, no one ever celebrated its power at home, the wealth and the strength which this divine gift confers upon its possessor. Fame, and that too after death, was all which hitherto the poets had pg 213 essayed themselves from their art. It seems to have been left to WITHER to discover that poetry was a present possession as well as a rich reversion, and that the muse had promise of both lives, of this and of that which was to come. The Mistress of Fervent is in substance a panegyric protracted through several thousand lines in the mouth of a single speaker, but diversified so as to produce an almost dramatic effect by the artful introduction of some ladies who are rather auditors than interlocutors in the scene, and of a boy whose singing furnishes pretense for an occasional change of meter, though the 7-syllable line in which the main part of it is written is that in which WITHER has shown himself so great a master that I do not know that I am always thankful to him for the exchange. WITHER has chosen to bestow upon the lady whom he commends the name of arete or virtue, and assuming to himself the character of Fervent or lover of virtue, there is a sort of propriety in that heaped measure of perfections, which he attributes to this partly real, partly allegorical personage. Drayton before him had shadowed his mistress under the name of idea or perfect pattern, and some of the old Italian love strains are couched in such religious terms as to make it doubtful whether it be a mistress or divine grace which the poet is addressing. In this poem, full of beauties, there are 2 passages of preeminent merit. The first is where the lover, after a flight of rapturous commendation, expresses his wonder why all men that are about his mistress, even to her very servants, do not view her with the same eyes that he does. The other is where he has been comparing her beauties to gold and stars and the most excellent things in nature, and fearing to be accused of hyperbole, the common charge against poets, vindicates himself by boldly taking upon him that these comparisons are no hyperboles, but that the best things in nature do, in a lover's eye, fall short of those excellencies which he adores in her. To the measure in which these lines are written, the wits of Queen Anne's days contemptuously gave the name of namby-pamby in ridicule of Ambrose Phillips, who has used it in some instances, as in the lines on Cuzzoni, to my feeling at least, very deliciously. But WITHER, whose darling measure it seems to have been, may show that in skillful hands it is capable of expressing the subtlest movements of passion. So true it is, which Drayton seems to have felt, that it is the poet who modifies the meter, not the meter the poet, in his own words, that what longer measure can go beyond the majesty of this? What Alexandrine is half so long in pronouncing or expresses labor slowly, but strongly surmounting difficulty with the life with which it is done in the second of these lines? Or what meter could go beyond these from Fervent?